Hello, this is Lock Noob for Lock Pickers United, and what I want to do today is get you all into lever lock picking. How am I going to do that? Well, we're going to use an iconic padlock, one which I know you can get all around the world, including the US, which is one of these Squire Old English padlocks. There are multiple models of different sizes. I'm using the 660 here. Why have I chosen this one? Well, aside from its availability, the fact is it's a really good lock to learn lever lock picking from. Not only will you get an understanding of how the levers feel, how to pick levers, but there are so many techniques just to get into this style of padlock that you'll be learning a whole bunch of techniques as well, which you can then use to go on and pick other types of lever lock. If at the end of this video you want to know more about lever lock picking, the types of lever locks, the tools used, all the terminology and the rest of it, I have a 5-video playlist on my channel which I really encourage you to go check out. The topic of lever locks is vast, and even with 5 separate videos on lever lock picking, I barely scratch the surface. Right, first let's remind ourselves what a lever lock actually is, and unlike a pin tumbler, it doesn't rely on separate key pins and driver pins being lifted to a shear line to open the lock. It relies on levers being lifted to a specific height to allow a bolt stump to be withdrawn through some gating and retract the bolt in the shackle. So here we go. The key goes in, we lift the levers to a specific height. You can see the bolt stump go past the bar in the gating and the bolt at the top retract from the shackle. That allows the lock to be opened. To relock it, you just do the same. The bitting lifts each of the levers which are pivoting on the axis to a specific height, giving clearance for the bolt stump to go past the gating here, and we go back closed. So how would we start picking a lock like this? Well, what we could do is we could buy the best professional level lockpick set that we can find for these type of locks, and we could use this to tension the lock and the wire to lift the levers, and that would work. But do you know what? Not all of us have access to these pro level tools, or indeed the money to buy them. So where can we start? Well, a good place to start might be buying yourself a cheaper commercial padlock pick set. This is actually a tip held in a holder, screwed in by these little arms, and this is designed for this type of Old English padlock. Then we have a professionally made lever wire to pick it. Let's see it in action. Let's quickly look at the key. What you'll see is there is a bitting on the key. These are called steps, most likely because they look like steps, and what you'll see is there is a bolt step. This is what engages with the bolt assembly at the back in a little notch called the talon. You'll be using this on the key to pull the bolt assembly into the lever pack. These are the lever steps. Naturally, these will lift the levers, all 4 of them in this case, to the right height, allowing the bolt stump to go through the gating when all of the levers are lifted to the correct height. Without the key, of course, we need to do both those things: act on the bolt assembly and lift the levers. So here is the tension tool we're going to use, and there's an upright which will act like the bolt step. The lever wire, just like pin tumbler picking, acts on the other mechanism, which in this case, instead of pins, is levers, and you'll be going through lifting the levers to the right height to get an open. So first things first, put our tension tool in, get our lever wire and put that in. You'll probably need to put a reasonable amount of tension on the lock, and what I tend to do is just rest the finger on the wire to keep it sort of straight, so I can guide, you can see there, guide the wire up and down the lock. One thumb underneath and finger over the top on these types of tools, and just put medium tension on. You're going to go through the pack by moving the lever wire up and down the lock, and you're looking for levers which are bound, just like pins in a pin tumbler lock. You're going to be gently pushing up on those, but we're not going to push them all the way. We're just going to push them a little bit, maybe, you know, ½ millimeter, a millimeter or so. We're going to walk the levers up the bolt stumps, and once they're all aligned, the bolt will slide to the right and open the lock. So here we go. It's going to go through, and already picked lever 3, and I could see the tension tool move slightly over to the right clockwise. So again, we're just trying to go through the lever pack. I'm not so worried about what lever I'm on at any one point. I'm more concerned about whether I can feel them binding, and if they are, I'm just moving them up a little bit by turning the lever wire. And you'll feel the tension tool slowly move or jump as you lift these wires to the right height. And once they're all to the right height, you'll know, because the whole thing turns around like that, and the shackle will be released. Now, don't panic about getting the tool out, just rotate it round and gently wriggle the wire until it releases, and you can remove it all from the lock. Can be a bit fiddly. There we go. Once it's open like this, you can actually pick it closed. You don't have to use the key. Picking one of these locks closed is pretty much the same. You put in your tension tool, but this time you're going to be tensioning counterclockwise. The only thing is it's actually hard to get the lever wire in, because you'll still need to pick the levers from this side in this type of lock, because they're pivoted here. So with a thin enough tension, the lever wire, I can go into the lock, and I can actually just wiggle it round. I can apply tension, and again, what I'm doing is I'm just going to find the levers that are binding, and I'm going to gently lift them. And there we go, all locked back up. So as you can see, this type of commercial tool, they can work great, but what if we just can't source this type of tool locally, or we can't stretch to their cost even though they are quite reasonably priced? Well, you can do an awful lot with just either the keys that come with the lock itself, a blank key if you can get hold of them, and some music wire. I got these lengths of 17 SWG or 1.4 millimeter music wire really easily. You can get them from all sorts of online vendors and retailers. To replicate a commercial wire, well, do you know what? All you need to do is take some of that wire and bend it. I know that just sounds silly, but you just need a couple of pairs of pliers, put a right angle bend in the tip, as long as it's not too thick. Like I said, about 1.4 millimeters is great for these types of locks, then you're fine. I actually just used 2 pairs of pliers, and I put a gentle curve on here. I also put a small finger file across the top to make it a bit flatter, but you don't have to do that. It's just a nice bit of aesthetics. It makes it feel a bit better in the lock. At the other end, well, I didn't go crazy. I just bent it round until it forms a sort of handle. Now I've got myself a lever wire for very little money. In terms of the key, well, we can take a blank like this, and we can just chop it down to leave an upright. So just grind it down with a rotary multi-tool or similar until we have just an upright the same size as the bolt step in a standard key. So there you go. You can see here I've got the key, got the thickness to the same thickness as the bolt step. I also ground down the key across here flat, so you can see it's significantly about 1.5 millimeters deeper than the key was originally. That will allow the lever wire to get in. To pick the lock with these tools, it's pretty much just the same, apart from the fact I need some vice grips to gently hold on to the key. So I'd insert this key where it's upright, I'll put in my homemade lever wire like this, and this will be a little bit tighter than a commercial tool because it's not quite as strong. I didn't want to remove so much material. I don't have the finger strength to apply the right torque to the key, so I will need some small vice grips just to grip hold of the key and provide some turning force. Now, it's very important not to apply too much because keys are inherently weaker than these commercial tools, and you just again walk that lever pack. Lock is starting to open because there we go with some small steps as we're moving through, and we do have an open. Look at that. So this was just with a blank key, or even if you've got the right bitting, a standard key that comes with the lock itself, and you can actually pick this backwards as well, albeit it can be a little bit more fiddly to remove the actual tools from the lock. What if you can't source some music wire that easily, but you can get hold of some blank keys, or you have a couple of spare keys for the padlock you bought? Well, do you know what? You can make one of these, which I think is a really, really cool little tool. Can you guess what it does? Well, you need a way to apply tension to the lock, but essentially this just acts like a key, but one lever at a time. So this is actually the pick tip. I actually took some time to actually carve in some little markers so I can mark off where the levers are. But how do we apply tension to the lock? You're right, if we put this key in and it goes all the way through to the back where there's a little guide hole, how do we apply tension? There is no space for a tension tool here. Well, there is space to act upon the bolt directly down the side of the shackle. Let me show you. Remember this cutaway? Remember where the bolt actually traps the shackle inside the lock? Well, this whole bolt assembly, from the talon down here to the bolt stumps to the bolt itself, all are joined together. You can apply pressure to any part of that, often by actuating the talon here, but you can just take something like a hex key and slide it down the side of the lock and just push on the bolt assembly directly. So essentially what this is doing is it's exploiting the fact that there is a guide hole at the back, and by removing all the rest of the bittings, nothing's stopping the key from moving back and forth in the lock, and therefore allowing an upright post left on the key to act as a lever pick. Very cool technique. However, there are two small downsides. The first one being, if you pick it like this and then you try to use the key to close it back up again, well, you can't. And you try to open it again, you can't. Oh no, I've broken the lock, that's it, I have to buy a new one. No, it's okay, don't panic. All it is that the bolt hasn't fully retracted, and you can just see the tip of it there. So you just take your hex key and you poke it. There we go, it's poked. That means the bolt has fully gone to the one side, and the key will of course work perfectly well now, no problems. And that's the second problem with this technique, is that once you picked it, you can't then re-pick it the opposing way, because there's no way to tension the bolt this way without using a different technique, or indeed using the key. So are there any other techniques we can use on this lock? Well, yeah, actually there are. So let's assume that you don't have any hex keys to hand and you can't get hold of any keys or key blanks, but you still want to be able to apply tension to this lock. How can you do that? Well, you can just go old school and use a tensioning wire. You tend to make these to a specific height that's usually, there you go, the bottom of the key all the way to the top of the steps, and then the height of the steps on top of that, like this. That means that when you insert it into the lock, like this, all the way up, you engage very nicely with the talon in the bolt assembly at the back, and you can see I've got a nice grip on it because you can see that bolt assembly moving back and forth as I move the wire back and forth. This is, however, my least favourite technique. It has the advantage, of course, that it's cheap and that it's actually easy to make. Just put a right angled bend in this thick 2.5mm music wire, file it either side and at the end so it's not too rough and it's not too wide. So it's easy to make. You can even use it with a wire. The difficulty of this is it's very, very hard to pick, balancing all of these wires in the lock at the same time. It's my least favourite technique, and frankly I think the other techniques are probably just more effective. The very last technique I want to show you with this lock, well, it's 2-in-1 tools. Now this actually isn't a 2-in-1 tool for this type of lock, although you can buy them. This is actually a very cheap Chinese lever pick, which 2-in-1, which actually I just modified. How did I modify it? Well, I just ground down the tension tip to the right height and made the pick tip a bit thinner, sanded down the stainless steel shaft here so it fits in the lock, and do you know what, it's actually reasonably good at opening these locks. I'll demonstrate it, but again, you might find that overall this is just overkill for this type of lock. So just worth saying that actually with a bit of skill you can make these 2-in-1s yourself with the right metal bar, tubing and some silver solder. A bit out of my skill range, I have to say, but I've seen many other people do it. These work just as you'd expect. You have a tension tip which goes in first, followed by the pick tip. In this case you can actually put them both in together quite easily. You apply tension by turning the tension tip all the way round, make sure it's activating that bolt, which it is, and then you just use the pick tip to go through the lever pack once it's under tension and just see if we can't find any binding levers and lift them. And we're open. So there we are. That's just a brief run through of the many different ways which we can exploit this lock and get an open with it, and also demonstrated a huge range of different sort of lock picking and lever lock entry techniques, which I really hope have piqued your interest. And I genuinely hope if you've never picked a lever lock before, that you go out and grab one. Something like this style of padlock is a really great place to start, and just try some of these techniques out. They're really, really good fun. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you again another time.